Cassandra sneaks into the underground spider kingdom to save her missing bro Marcus, and finds he's elected to join a more advanced collective, Consciousness of Intelligent Arachnids. What starts as a desperate rescue mission becomes her role, as envoy between two worlds, human and spider, and two corpora of thought for the betterment of both. The night Cassandra Thorne's little brother vanished in the Blackwood Forest, she knew police would find no trace, only darkness and quiet. They never did. 3 months of searching, 3 months of false leads and empty promises, 3 months of watching her parents rot slowly from the inside, as they put on brave faces by day. But Cassandra had picked up whispers around town. The old-timers whispered about the things which should not be, of a land hidden beneath the forest, where people's night terrors became flesh. They called it the Spider Kingdom, and they told anyone foolish enough to listen that once you went in, you either never came out or you left a completely changed man. Marcus was 12 when he disappeared, 12 years old and scatter freckles around his nose and an unquenchable addiction to gathering beetles and transferring them to mason jars. He had been wandering the forest edges, something he had done 100 times before, when the earth seemed to swallow him up. The search dogs lost him in the vicinity of some unnatural circle of dead trees beyond which the air became heavy and wrong, as though the whole world inside that circle had gone oppressive. Here she was, 6 months later, at the circle again, and Cassandra could feel her choice like a force on her chest. She had spent months preparing. She'd researched every tales of the folklore she could find. She'd learned of the creatures that supposedly ruled the underground kingdom. The Spider Kingdom, so the stories said, was more than a location. It was a living thing, a hive mind of arachnid intelligence that had transcended even what nature had in mind for it. In the pack on her shoulders was all she would need to survive here in enemy territory. Altered climbing gear, headlamps with spare batteries, emergency rations, and most essential of all, a batch of chemical compounds she had concocted in her garage laboratory. If the legends were true, if those in the Spider Kingdom were as susceptible to some poisons as normal spiders, she might stand a chance. The drop had started with a cave-hidden entrance she'd found after weeks of slow, methodical search. The entrance was scarcely as wide as her shoulders, and when she slimmed herself to slide through it, she sensed the temperature drop severely. The walls were coated with something that appeared to be silk but that felt wrong beneath her fingers. Too slick, too warm, almost alive. 20 feet below, the thin passage widened into a cavern of potentially geological defiant dimensions. Ceiling extended impossibly high above her. It receded into darkness that her headlamp couldn't penetrate. But it was not the size of the space that made her blood freeze. It was the webs. They weren't ordinary spider webs. These were wonders of architecture, geometric sequences governed by mathematical rules she could not begin to decipher. They clung to all the surfaces, walls and ceiling, forming a three-dimensional maze that throbbed with its own internal rhythm. And here and there through the maze flitted forms that made her brain revolt at what she saw. The spiders were huge. Some were the size of dinner plates, and they get as big as small dogs. But it wasn't their size that was truly terrifying about them, it was their intelligence. Cassandra imaged Quesocasixfit, Diaspedica Registra on or behind the Senna. They were organizing, and planning, and coordinating it as if it were a military operation. The first day was spent mapping the web structures and the patrol patterns. Identifying the spiders moved in groups, but they were never alone, always in contact with a web network that seemed to act as their living communication system. After one day, every vibration, every touch, every movement was information that flowed through the colony's collective consciousness. On the second day, she found the first dead humans. Their bones were wrapped in cocoon and hung from the ceiling as mystical ornaments. Some of them were old and worn out by time and moisture. Others were young-looking and recently dead, the remains of clothes and personal items. This one was wearing a wedding ring. That one was holding a child's toy. This one somewhere lying a pair of glasses. Marcus wasn't among them. That didn't make her feel at ease. If Marcus wasn't dead, he was way deeper in the nightmare realm than her, and she would bring him home. Deeper tunnels were almost impossible to navigate. The web patterns formed a three-dimensional city, chambers connected, silk highways that served several purposes in the hierarchy. There were nurseries, 20 meters above the ground, where thousands of egg sacs hung like fruit from specially constructed trees. There were food storage areas, human dead and torn. Rags, wrapped in silk, looked like various creatures praised, but it was the throne room that unveiled the extent of what she'd blundered into. The chamber was huge, and the walls covered in webs that wove intricate murals of the colony's history. At its center was a creature that defied every expectation she'd ever had about the beings that dwelt in the spider kingdom. The queen looked at least as large as a compact car, her exoskeleton shining with an almost metallic luster. But there was more that distinguished her from the rest besides her size. And so it was not just the unmistakable intelligence in her cluster of eyes, the way she moved with a premeditated sort of calculation, the ornate patterns carved into her carapace, but that collectively these appeared to indicate not simply consciousness, but culture. Named after Malmagnat in France, where a spider queen was caught and her subjects left to die, you would see so many smaller spiders with distinguishing marks that showed which rung of the ladder they were on. Exoskeleton upgraded warriors, warriors with stronger exoskeletons and larger fangs. Also workers with apodel attachment for spinning of web, and long-legged hyper-alert scouts. Cassandra sat and watched from her place of hiding and saw something that changed everything. The queen was speaking to more than just her subjects. It seemed a piece that had sent a chill down her spine. What hung in a silken cocoon from the ceiling was human, but unmistakably animate. The subject was hanging in a web harness that displayed limited mobility, and Cassandra was horrified to realize that the queen was talking to her prisoner. The human was Marcus, but he was not the same 12-year-old boy who vanished 6 months earlier. The hair had become long and white and the skin white and pale and transparent, and the eyes retained intelligence which seemed many years beyond those that accompanied them. He was talking to the queen in a language of clicks and whistles and getting answers in intricate leg movements and web vibrations. A blow hit her, as if it had been a physical one. Marcus wasn't a prisoner. He was a collaborator. Over the course of the next few days, Cassandra managed to deduce the truth through keen observation and listening to the odd conversations her brother would have with the queen. The Spider Kingdom was not merely a place populated by evolved arachnids. It wasn't some faceless other from the shadowy corners of the earth, though, but something much more complicated, and much scarier. The queen had been experimenting for decades, maybe centuries. She had been studying human psychology, finding ways to dismantle mental blocks and reshape consciousness as she wished. Marcus hadn't just been captured, he had been courted, and his mind gradually twisted until he believed with all his heart he was serving a higher cause. The missing children were not taken at random. They had been well chosen for the transformation process of the queen. In order to evolve beyond the limits of their kind, the Spider Kingdom required human intellect, and the queen had found a means of incorporating human consciousness into the collective mind of the colony. Marcus wasn't just talking to the queen, he was becoming part of her. That knowledge had ruined her. Ought to have sent her flying to the surface to sound the alarm, to hare out like a mad thing for the authorities, to evacuate the surrounding towns, to do anything save what she proposed to do. But I could see my brother was changing, and one night my Nana and I went to speak with Raymond, and when we walked into his room and I saw how peaceful he looked telling us about his new understanding of the world, I knew that the only salvation wasn't in saving him, but in something much more radical even than rescue. The chemicals in her pack were not spider venom alone. They were accelerants, chemical blends that were formulated to spread quickly through organic systems. If the Spider Kingdom did indeed operate as a single organism, and if she had poisoned it in the right location, then she had, in theory, poisoned the whole hive with a single sweet spot application. But to do so would be to kill Marcus and everything else. For whatever weight of morals stood upon that decision, she had been haunted by it as she prepped for what would either be the colony's annihilation or her death. She had come to save her brother, but the brother she'd known was already lost. The figure dangling in that cocoon of silk was one entirely different person, one who had found peace and purpose in a realm of dreams and horrors. The night she was to strike, the colony was celebrating something. The weave holdings of the whole underground web rippled to rhythmic pulsations, and the spiders gyrated in unison in steps of strange music. From the behavior she'd witnessed, she'd worked out that the queen was going to metamorphose into something, and that it was going to take the combined efforts of the whole colony to do it. It was the perfect opportunity. With the spiders preoccupied with their ritual, she could make it to the central web junction and inject her lethal dose directly into the colony's nervous system. The chemicals would metastasize through the network in a matter of minutes, bringing about cellular collapse. As it cascaded through all linked organisms, she walked through the known corridors, quiet and measured after days of training. The closer she got to the throne room, the louder the sounds of the celebration were. Pheromones heavy in the air and the odd harmonic noise of spiders by the thousand all moving in perfect musical synchrony. The center web junction was right, where she thought, a massive nexus of silken strands linking every part of the colony. Just as she was about to deploy her gas weapons, she felt something behind her. Marcus was at the chamber door, his altered expression revealing no surprise. At her presence, he'd known she was coming. The colony had known of her presence the instant that she had come into their home. "You have no idea of what you are about to tear to shreds," he said, his timbre resonating with harmonics that overtones seemed to ring through the structure of the web. "Cassandra, this isn't the nightmare you think it is. This is evolution." She pivoted to him, her hand still clutching the chemical dispersal unit. "You're 12 years old, Marcus. You should be too busy with homework, video games, and other fun things to be engaged in some alien group mind. Age is just a biological barrier," he responded, approaching with that unnaturally smooth stride she'd seen in all of the colony's human converts. "If I went up, it would mature me more in 6 months than on the surface my whole life. The Queen has opened to me a scene of things to come that even now we can't imagine." "The Queen has your head filled with lies," Cassandra said, and even as she said the words, she took in the reality of his conviction. Now this was not a product of coercion or torture. This was faith, pure and total faith. "Has she?" Marcus asked. "Or has she simply lifted those restrictions that were keeping me down?" "Look around you, Cassandra. Look at what they've built. This isn't destruction or parasitism. This is symbiosis beyond anything our species has ever managed." It was as if the Queen herself had appeared in the shadows behind him as they spoke. Her alien beauty was even more pronounced in close quarters. She moved with fluid purpose, and when she said, her voice was as manifestly harmonic as Marcus's. "Your brother decided to hang back," she said, her words somehow able to be translated, even with her clearly alien voice box. "You won't be forced to join us. You have the option to safely and leave as well as join us. But you use that weapon, you'll be committing genocide against a species that has only appeared to be curious about yours." "You've been snatching up children," Cassandra said, less sure of herself than she let on. "You've been separating people from their families. We've been giving away chances to those who were already defeated," the Queen replied. "Every human that joined us was facing a life of limitation, of unfulfilled potential. We don't harm anyone. Who really deserves to be in your world?" "That's not for you to decide," Cassandra said. But she was thinking of Marcus's struggles at school, his hard time finding friends, his feeling that he was alien to everyone else around him. Had he genuinely liked their world, or had he been struggling through it? "The decision is yours. For now," the Queen purred, drawing closer with a truly mesmerizing grace. "You can kill us all, including your brother, and go back to the surface knowing that you've neutralized a threat to the human race. Or you can try to understand what we're actually offering." "Prove it," Cassandra said, shocking herself as the words left her mouth. "If what you say is true, this is the experience Marcus has had. Show me what they are." Queen stuck out one of her front legs, and Marcus nodded. When Cassandra touched the extended limb, she felt a jolt of sensation, like nothing she had ever experienced before. Suddenly, she was observing the world through a collective colony brain. Each spider, each strand, each pulse of information that moved through the network was part of a vast, linked mind that stretched throughout the domain below. But more than that, she could feel the emotions, the thoughts, the dreams of anyone. In the collective, there was no forgetting and no erasure of personality. There was multiplication of consciousness, not decentralization. And thus every man was able to experience existence from more than one point of view at the same time. Marcus was still Marcus, but he was also one part of something infinitely larger and more complex. She lived the history of the colony through the community. She watched the species of the Queen of the Universe evolve over millions of years, acquiring not only intelligence, but wisdom. She observed their initial exposure to humans, their obsession with individual consciousness, their meticulous investigation of human psychology and potential. She witnessed the other humans who'd flocked to the colony over the decades, not as victims but as people who had signed on for an experiment in consciousness expansion. Scientists, artists, philosophers, and yes, children who had discovered something in the Spider Kingdom they were not able to find in human society. But she also witnessed the Queen's larger purpose. This wasn't just an attempt to build a hybrid collective, it was prepping for something bigger. Over the net she saw futures, outcomes that were only possible with the two species' combined intelligence. The bond was brief, but when it was over, Cassandra felt changed forever. She could still sense the echo of that great awareness, the recollection of being part of something far vaster than herself. "Now you know," Marcus said, and his eyes held the wonder she was experiencing. This is not a question of losing ourselves. It's not only about who we are in infinite regression. Cassandra gazed at the chemical dispersal device in her hand, at the Queen, at her brother. The choice weighed in her chest, but for the first time since taking IT first into the Spider Kingdom, she knew what work she had to do. My brother is who I came here to save, she said slowly. But I think I sort of misread what that was supposed to mean. She placed the device on the ground and backed away. If Marcus is truly happy here, if he really wants this as his future, then I don't have a right to take that from him. But I want to make sure that he's making this decision of his own free will, and not because his mind has been so muddied by the attacks. The Queen came forward, a huge sight, made somehow gentle by the weirdness of the thing. It's reversible, she said of the change. If he takes off, he can go back to the way he was. But what he's learned, the memories he's formed, the growth he's realized will never die off. He will forever be a bearer of both worlds. Marcus, said Cassandra, and she gazed into her brother's eyes. Forget everything else. Forget the Queen, forget the colony, forget what little you think you know. Do you want to come home? Marcus was silent for a very long moment, his features running through emotions she couldn't interpret. At last he said, and his tone was that of a man much older than he, "Home is where you fit in," he said, "and I belong here. Not because I've been programmed or brainwashed, but because I've discovered something I never had in the other world. I've found purpose. I've come across a family that knows me to the core. I've found a future worth fighting for. But what about Mom and Dad?" Tears that she hadn't even known she was capable of filled Cassandra's eyes, and she muttered, "What about the family you've already got? They love the Marcus that they know," he said, gently. But that Marcus was never going to be able to be happy in the conjured-up world. He was always going to be the odd kid with the bugs, and no place to belong. Here they are strengths, not weaknesses. It felt like something broke in Cassandra's chest, but it wasn't despair, it was acceptance. Marcus was right. He'd always been odd, always hunting for something their family couldn't give him, and if he'd found it here, in this impossible realm beneath the earth, then maybe her job as his sister wasn't to bring him home. Perhaps it was in defense of his decision. "Can I visit?" she inquired, the word tasting odd in her mouth. "Can I come back and check up on you?" From the Queen's jaws came something that resembled a smile. "You are welcome to be here any time," she said, "but know that when you go, you will not be the same person. Every connection to our shared will show scars. One day you might have to make the same choice your brother did." "I get it," Cassandra said, and she did. Already she could sense that draw of the great unity, the lure of giving up her personal isolation for the comfort of shared community. And there's something else. Marcus came up to her. "The colony has been getting ready for first contact with the surface world," Counselor McAllister added. "Not invasion, not conquest, but communication. They want to give the same option they gave me to humanity. But they require ambassadors, people who can straddle both worlds. You want me to be a conduit." Cassandra got it at once. "To be able to bring your world into my world. The upper world is becoming a different place," the Queen voiced. "Your species is at a difficult juncture where they are faced with new kinds of consciousness, new ways of thinking about problems. We can assist, but only if we are able to communicate properly." Cassandra surveyed the throne room, the complex scales that had evolved over millennia of trial and error, at the spiders whose intelligence showed in their many eyes, and her brother who had discovered peace in the most unlikely of places. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll be your ambassador. But I need time to prepare. I have to figure out how to explain all this to people who think spiders are just bugs to squish." "We've got plenty of time," the Queen replied, "and you will not be alone. You're not the only one. The ones that have found our realm and decided to keep ties in both sides. You will find them when you are ready." Cassandra moved towards leaving the Spider Kingdom, and the burden of her new role seemed to weigh heavily on her shoulders. She was just a sister searching for her missing brother, no more. She was the bridge between two worlds, the translator for two utterly different forms of consciousness. The rising was not like the descent. Its threatening web patterns were welcoming now, and the spiders she passed on her way gave her deft nods of greeting. She was not an outsider to their world any longer. She was a guest, a friend, a possible ally. As she stumbled out of the cave opening, the sun of that dawn was too hard on her eyes. The surface world felt smaller, somehow more contained, like she'd gotten used to the wide-open spaces of the underground, but it was still her world, still the world she'd been born and raised into. On the way back to town, she was able to digest everything that happened. She adventured the Spider Kingdom as a frantic maiden on a rescue quest. She was quitting as an ambassador for a species that few other people even knew existed. Her parents were awaiting her at home with the quasi-hopeful, quasi-anxious look they had regarded her with for months. They had been anticipating her return, with news of Marcus one way or another. "I found him," she recalled saying as she took her place at the kitchen table with them, where they'd eaten thousands of their family meals. "He's alive, he's all right, and he's happy. Where is he?" her mother asked, as if Marcus might walk through the door. "He's left where he was meant to be," said Cassandra cautiously. "A place where he's encountered people who understand him and love what makes him different." "I need to see him," her father said, using the voice he'd commanded during her childhood. "I want to bring him home." "He is home," Cassandra replied. "Not the one we pictured for him, but the one he made. And he's not a little boy anymore. It has changed him in ways that can't be reversed." In the hours that followed, she talked to them about as much of the truth as she believed they could bear. She talked about an underground world, about people who had found a different way of life, about Marcus changing from a vulnerable child to a strong young man who knows what to stand for. There was no mention of the spiders, the hive mind, or the truth about the spider kingdom. There would be time for those revelations later, once she had worked out how to demonstrate them in a manner that wouldn't spread panic, or to be dismissed as baseless rantings. "Can we visit him?" asked her mother, who was in tears. "We can. At least get in there and make sure he's okay." "Maybe," Cassandra said. "But not yet. You need time to settle into your new reality, and he needs time to accept that you aren't the same woman who vanished 6 months ago." "I don't care how different he looks," said her father grimly. "He's still my son." "Yes," Cassandra agreed, "he is. And he loves you both. But he also loves the life he's found, and forcing him to pick between them wouldn't be fair to anyone." The months that ensued were hard. Her parents wrestled with the notion that they had a son who was alive but was unreachable. They wanted to call the police, to form search parties, to do something instead of sit and wait for word from a daughter who said she'd found Marcus, but couldn't get him back home. But Cassandra was learning her way around her new job as an ambassador. She journeyed frequently into the Spider Kingdom, and found herself learning more about them and becoming more connected to the hive mind they all shared. She observed Marcus growing and changing, the human mind of her friend mixed with colony knowledge in ways that were beneficial to both species. She also started to find others like her, others who had stumbled upon the Spider Kingdom and had decided to keep a foot in both worlds. There were more than she had anticipated, all over the country, each acting as a conduit between human and arachnid minds. Together they made ready for the next step in the Queen's scheme. The world above was spiraling toward radical transformations that demanded fresh thinking and new kinds of collaboration. Climate change, resource exhaustion, social decay, technological upheaval all were challenges that might be better addressed through the collective intelligence that the Clit Spider Kingdom had achieved. But to bring such radical notions into human society would take careful planning and slow implementation. It would be about how to communicate directly the merits of collective consciousness without provoking fear or rejection. The initial contacts were discreet. Papers by the scientists who had visited the spider for the Spider Kingdom, new theories about consciousness and intelligence, artwork from artists who had been to the collective showing bizarre geometric patterns that are impossible, moving with a life of their own. Music written by those who had learned to hear the overtones of the web. Every contact was meant to plant seeds of the possible, to ready human brilliant minds for the idea that there is more to you than meets the physical eye. And gradually, cautiously, the way was being cleared for a more straightforward revelation. Cassandra became the focal point of these preparations, providing communication and understanding between the two worlds. She saw how her brother became arguably one of the community's most effective human ambassadors. His boyish exuberance, paired with an encyclopedic understanding bridging to species. It was not until the day arrived that the Queen felt a more formal link had to be made. Not invasion and conquest, but invitation, a proposal of collaboration between two different, yet converging minds. The place they picked was significant, the mouth of the cave where Cassandra had first passed into the Spider Kingdom. Delegates from both Earths would convene there where surface and depths intersect, to open discussions that could transform both civilizations. At the mouth of the cave, as delegates from all these institutions came forward with expressions of curiosity or of concern, Cassandra felt the weight of history being pushed in against her chest. Now was the time when everything would change, when humanity would have to decide between fear and evolution. Marcus rose to the surface, a young man, and wore a look of his rebirth. He had eyes that seemed to look right into my soul, and Under a head of wild hair, his actions were performed with that fluid grace of someone who thought in 3D. Others, such as himself, followed behind. Mortals who had become members of the Spider Kingdom and who were now living samples of what could be accomplished through the partnership. Their silent presence exuded a peace only derived from being part of something bigger than us. At last, the Queen herself turned up, a huge sleekified animal that seemed to be somehow both majestic and mild. It had been her decision to come out of hiding, to emerge from the Seren, to make herself known, and abandon the shadows and the mystery that had kept her kind hidden for so many years. Human delegates responded in typical combinations of awe, terror, and curiosity. Some kind of fell back on their heels, their DNA reminding them that spiders the size of a dinner plate were not to be trusted. The rest came closer, driven by scientific curiosity or their beast-like fears. "We do not come as invaders. We come as allies," the Queen said, her voice echoing through the cave's mouth in tones that soothed the humans within their heightened emotional state. "We are offering not domination but cooperation. We want to augment your consciousness, not replace it." The result was of hours of painstaking dialogue, with Marcus and his fellow human ambassadors working as translators. Between fundamentally incompatible modes of consciousness, the Queen described her race, how they had developed group consciousness, what it was like, the things they had seen in humans. Each detailed the struggles facing their respective peoples, their isolation of speckled individuals, an economy that could not handle Spider Kingdom expansion, environmental changes to ecosystems on the surface and underneath all the plates. And she proposed solutions that would benefit both: shared consciousness that allowed for individuality, group-based problem-solving that preserved personal innovation, symbiotic relationships that enriched both species, with no loss to either. That the human delegates asked tough questions about autonomy, about the dangers of becoming part of a collective, about whether the process was reversible. The Queen addressed each concern militantly and with honesty, even volunteering to have her process tested by volunteers, some of whom would then return to tell her their experience. 3 human volunteers would go temporarily native in the collective mind of the Spider Kingdom by the end of the day. They'd spend a week plugged into the network, savoring the extended cognition and hive-mind problem-solving capacities of the partnership, then bring the good news back to human civilization. When the formal session was over, Cassandra was standing outside the cave with Marcus as the human delegations made ready to depart. The weight of what they'd done pushed down on her chest, but it was also accompanied by a deep sense of hope. "Do you think it will work?" Marcus said, with an undertone that gave the impression that he was also speaking to the community below. "Think it does, doesn't it?" Cassandra answered. "Both species are at crossroads. These demands for novel modes of thought are on humanity, and for the Spider Kingdom to transcend itself in its present form. That only if we worked together, then maybe we could do things that we couldn't do on our own. This is the first of many. The Queen feels it's just the beginning," Marcus said. "She's been communicating with other collective intelligences, other intelligences that have evolved beyond individual consciousness. Dear readers, Earth might be about ready to join a much larger community of minds." What someone was saying was beyond belief. If the Spider Kingdom was just one example of collective consciousness, if there were others waiting to be contacted, then humanity was poised on the brink of a leap that would make its previous accomplishments look pitiful. "Are you ready for that?" Cassandra asked her brother. "Can you be part of helping shepherd humanity through the biggest change in its existence?" Marcus beamed, and for an instant she saw the 12-year-old that she had been sent to save. But overlaying that familiar face was the sagacity of someone who had lived consciousness from many different angles, who had been taught to think past what individual awareness could tell you. "I have been ready since the first day I linked up to the collective," he said. "Maybe this is what I was supposed to do. What we were always supposed to do." Standing on the threshold between 2 worlds, she felt the some truth in his words rattle in her bones. She'd come to the Spider Kingdom to save her brother, but had discovered something much bigger, a purpose that superseded family, species, and the limitations of individual awareness. An uncharted future lay ahead, and the possibilities seemed endless. Mankind would have to select between fear and growth, between isolation and integration, between the confinement of individual consciousness and the vast expanse of collective awareness. But Cassandra now felt, for the first time since Marcus had disappeared into the forest, that they were making the right choice. It had showed them the path to transcend their limits now, to blossom like the Spider Kingdom, while keeping what set them apart and defined their humanity. The nightmare that had hunted the hunters was now something else altogether, a bridge between worlds, a translator among modes of consciousness, a beacon toward a future that neither race could reach alone. And in that future, hunter and hunted would cease to exist as meaningful labels, replaced by partnership and cooperation and the limitless possibilities that spring from minds joined in the pursuit of common ends. The tale of the Spider Kingdom had only just been spun, and Cassandra Thorne, last desperate sister on a rescue mission, had become one of its most prominent authors.